In stranded knitting, there is a concept called colour dominance. Usually one colour will be dominant and will be your pattern colour, and the other colour will be by comparison rather weak, and this will be your background colour. You can see this in the main motif on the mitten in front of me, where the red coloured yarn is dominant and pops out from the blue coloured yarn, which acts as a background. Normally when you're knitting continentally or English style or a combination of these two styles for two-stranded knitting, the rule is that the foreground colour, in this case red, is carried below the background colour, in this case blue, and this is in order to make the pattern stand out. A popular way of achieving this is to carry the dominant or pattern colour continentally in your left hand and the background colour in your right hand. That's actually how I knit this mitten. So when you look at the inside of this mitten, you will see how the floats of the pattern colour, red in this case, ride below floats of the background colour, which is blue in this case. The other day though, I finished knitting the second mitten of this pair, and I decided to do so by knitting around the neck, or rather knitting with the yarn tensioned at my shoulders on some DIY knitting pins. And during the process I discovered something interesting about colour dominance when you're doing stranded knitting with the yarn carried around the neck. It's actually quite obvious when you think about it, but I wasn't thinking, and so it sort of came as a surprise to me. To begin with, I assumed that the yarn should be carried in exactly the same way as it's carried when you're knitting continentally and or English style, and that is with the foreground colour feeding from my left shoulder and the background colour feeding from my right shoulder. As I was knitting, I could see the blue background colour floats riding over the top of my red foreground floats, and that comforted me. And here is the mitten, which was knit around the neck. It's inside out because I want to show you how the floats conform to the rule that the background floats should ride over the top of the foreground coloured floats. And now if I turn this special mitten inside out and place it next to the normal mitten, you'll see that there is a vital difference between the two mittens. Firstly, the blue on this motif is dominant and the red of the pattern is diminutive. Compare the mitten to this normal mitten in which the red motif is dominant and the blue background is diminutive, as it should be. The second thing of note on my neck knit mitten here is that motifs which have direction, such as these arrows, are pointing in the opposite direction to those on the normally knit mitten. What this tells me about knitting around the neck is that because we're working from the purl side and going in the opposite direction to that which we work when we're on the knit side, everything is reversed, and that has to include the manner in which the dominant and weak colours are carried. So, the colour dominance rule for stranded knitting around the neck is that the foreground or pattern colour feeds in from your right hand shoulder and the background colour feeds in from your left hand shoulder. In this way, the foreground or pattern colour will be carried over the background colour and will dominate so that your motifs properly pop from their background.